All right, well, let's get back to work here. The next item on the agenda is our ordinances and public hearings. And so the next item is Ordinance 332, which is related to transfer times. To remind everybody who's here, Ordinance 332 would increase transfer times on TriMet from 2 hours to 2.5 hours. It had its first reading in December 2013, and then on January 2014, the board unanimously tabled the ordinance until we received further guidance from the Federal Transit Administration on whether to change transfer times, whether changes in transfer times constituted a fair change, which would then trigger the need for an equity analysis. Having learned this last summer that the answer to that question was yes, when considering future transfer changes, TriMet has been working with existing data and the Federal Transit Administration to prepare and finalize an equity analysis. And those of you who were here last month know that the analysis was presented to the board at our November meeting. And seeing no objections or questions to the analysis, we directed staff to place Ordinance 332 on our December business meeting agenda for second reading and a public hearing. So that's kind of the history. As a first order of business, since we tabled this ordinance in January, we need to now untable the ordinance if we want to consider it. So first off, I would ask, is there a motion to untable Ordinance 332?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion to untable? Okay, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to untable Ordinance 332 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. Okay. So Ordinance 332 is now untabled and may be considered. I do want to note there's one minor administrative change that we need to make to the proposed ordinance, which is really the effective date. Because the time that has passed since our initial reading of the ordinance, we need to change the operative date of ordinance from March 1st, 2014 to March 1st, 2015. And I'm going to direct our general counsel to make sure that this clerical change is made through, I think, your legal term,
Interlineation.
Interlineation. Thank you very much. So we'll allow you to make that change. All right? Now it's some words that I never knew about, okay? So with that, I'm going to now ask general counsel to read Ordinance 332 by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Ordinance 332 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, TriMet extending transfer times from 2 hours to 2.5 hours and amending TriMet Code Chapter 19 transfer provisions. This is the second reading, and as noted by the Board President, this would have an operative date of March 1st, 2015 if adopted.
Thank you. All right, with that, again, at our November business meeting, the board agreed that although we had already had a public hearing on Ordinance 332 in December of 2013, it would be advisable to have a second public hearing on this ordinance because of the time that's passed since that first reading and while we were waiting to hear back from the Federal Transit Administration. So I therefore open a public hearing on Ordinance 332. The public hearing is intended to hear from the community specifically regarding Ordinance 332. I do need to note that written comments already received online or through the mail have been shared with the board, and comment cards completed today will be forwarded to the board members and will become part of the formal public hearing record. In a moment, I'd like to invite up those who have signed up to speak at two at a time. I note there's only 4 people who've signed up for this ordinance, so again, if you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes, that would be greatly appreciated. If indeed you want to provide additional information to us, you can include them in the comment cards or get it to the staff and they will get that to us. So with that, I'm going to call up folks 2 at a time to testify. I'm going to have Keith Schultz. I see he's got his raincoat on, which is probably wise, and even more, which I probably continue to mess up your name. You're going to remind me. All right.
There are multiple pronunciations for it. Actually,
Thank you. Keith,
Okay.
welcome.
Welcome. Good morning. I'm Keith Schultz, current chair of the BRU Leadership Committee. I'd like to invite BRU members and allies to stand in solidarity for our cause here. And I will try to keep my comments brief today because you've heard me talk about the transfer issues for many years. Bus Riders Unite was formed just over 4 years ago to work with bus riders and give them a stronger voice in TriMet decision-making. Early on, we discovered the need for longer transfer times, and the campaign for a fair transfer was the very first campaign that BRU prioritized. We spoke with literally thousands of transit users and obtained over 6,000 petition signatures from riders in support of longer transfer times. And to this day, when we go out on the buses talking to riders, the issue of transfers is still one of the top concerns we hear about. Over 30 community organizations signed on to this campaign because they know how much it will benefit low-income riders like myself and people of color who have been pushed out of the urban core of our region by gentrification. TriMet has had a mostly time-based fare system for many years, and when the zone system was eliminated, the fare system became strictly time-based. Many low-income riders who depend on transit for daily chores have used these time-based transfers in flexible ways for decades. In fact, even while riders are still waiting for longer transfer times, and hopefully that wait ends today, TriMet itself has already benefited significantly from this campaign. When we at Opal and Bus Riders Unite began bringing the issue to TriMet, it didn't understand it. Staff was mostly unaware of how low-income riders use single fares. But to your credit, TriMet now understands how important this flexibility is, and the agency better understands how riders actually use the system in the real world. This is already a small victory for the agency and for riders. So thank you for bringing back Ordinance 332 for a final vote. An increase in transfer times to 2.5 hours is not everything the riders have asked for or need, but it is a very important step in the right direction. Those of us who make longer trips on multiple lines or make quick round trips or miss a transfer connection or travel during times of the day or week when service levels are still poor will really appreciate this improvement. We are grateful for the opportunity to work with you on transit issues, and we hope this is the beginning of a stronger and more collaborative relationship between BRU and TriMet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Keith.
Morning, members of the board. As you know, I'm Avon Moore, volunteer leader with Bus Riders Unite, and I started working on this campaign in January 2013. That summer, I was part of the BRU TriMet working group that met regularly to ask and answer questions about what our fare proposal would do. This work group included Jonelle Bell, Director of Diversity and Transit Equity, and former TriMet CFO Dave Auxier. We talked about, in this group, the problems our proposal would address and the equity and cost implications of our proposal. I think that these conversations developed our capacity to better engage with TriMet, and I'm confident that it improved TriMet's capacity to engage with riders and advocates like me. BRU has always had working knowledge of the system from a rider perspective. We understand that access to transit is about more than just bus frequency or location. It's about affordability. If you can't afford the ticket, you can't access the system. In the course of our engagement with TriMet, we've demonstrated that adding time to transfers would serve everyone who counts their pennies when taking the bus. It shouldn't have to cost $5 to run a short errand or to take a trip across the system. We pointed out, as part of our discussions, that it's so challenging because our network is full of holes. We've lost more than 100,000 revenue hours since 2008, and I've passed out a graph for you so you can see the scope of the transit cuts and how far we have to go to claw our way back even to where we were in 2008, let alone address the long-standing lack of service in the outer district. We're working with TriMet to develop policies to guide those investment decisions, But in the meantime, we could address the affordability piece of this problem for a tiny fraction of the cost of expanding service. TriMet's estimate puts the cost of extending the transfer as low as $1.5 million. If you applied the same amount to adding service, you could put more buses on a couple of frequent service lines, but that's it. As we detailed in 2013, that doesn't help riders who have to transfer to and from a low-frequency line. As a result of this work, I think that we have more of a shared language with TriMet. For our own part, we learned more about the data that TriMet has at its disposal, and we learned more about the roles that different TriMet staff play and how different needs are prioritized. The result of this dialogue is a more sophisticated ridership, and that's good for everyone in the region. I've said before that BRU could be TriMet's biggest ally, and in some ways we already are. It's been difficult, but we learned from difficulty, and BRU and TriMet are now better positioned to work together. A yes vote on this issue, an issue that is truly a rider-generated, rider-advocated policy change, will show the public that it truly values the wisdom and experience of the riders that it serves. We know that TriMet bristles at the suggestion that it doesn't listen to riders, but this would be the most powerful evidence in the history of the agency to suggest that it's listening, and it would make it easier for riders and the agency to find common ground moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Nicely timed.
I know.
Nicely timed. All right, the next two I have are Nicole Phillips and John Oster. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Nicole Phillips, a volunteer with BRU and a member of its leadership committee. A lot has happened since I first appeared before the board. That day, I was an angry, frustrated transit rider determined to give you a piece of my mind. And while we've come full circle on Ordinance 332, I appear today having learned many lessons over the intervening months, the most important being that we are most effective when we are allies. As we move forward with the often difficult decisions surrounding projects like e-fare, service planning, and Title VI equity concerns, BRU is strongly committed to working collaboratively with TriMet to ensure that the best interest of both TriMet and its riders are equally served. As initially a member of BRU and now its representative on TriMet's Transit Equity Advisory Committee, I've seen TriMet's attitude transform from the faceless transit company running a business to a transit company willing to ally itself with its riders to provide the best service possible while addressing riders' perception that TriMet doesn't listen to their concerns. While some of you may find the latter uncomfortable or even may not understand, it is a real concern. But when we in BRU's leadership are able to say that TriMet isn't the enemy, you are listening, our efforts to mobilize riders around things like service enhancements, e-fare, or even fare enforcement or profiling are much more effective, ensuring more community involvement and support. I know this is true because it's true for me. The issues that TriMet faces are significant and need riders' support. This doesn't just include things like e-fare, but also increasing funding of TriMet operations at the regional, state, and national level. These are battles that TriMet can't win alone. But if TriMet can prove that it treats its riders as partners and not just as clients, we can work together to fight these battles together. Over the years, TriMet and BRU have often been on opposite sides of the issues surrounding transit, including extending transfer times to 2.5 hours. I won't rehash the details. We've discussed this ad nauseum. Today, I think it's more vital to our mutual continued success to emphasize that the board's resounding yes on longer transfer times is a reaffirmation of TriMet's commitment to its riders and to ensuring that we, TriMet, BRU, and transit riders, can maintain and grow a less adversarial relationship as we move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate your comments. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair Warner, board members. I first just want to say I'm really humbled to work with such strong leaders within Bus Riders Unite, and we've come a long way together over the years, and they speak for themselves. There's really nothing I'm going to add in terms of what they've created over these past 4 years and the energy that they've brought to keep this work going when it could have easily fizzled out many times. I do just want to very briefly mention that, I think that we have this opportunity to really turn a corner here. We have bigger fights out there that we both need to work together on. Nicole mentioned, statewide federal transportation funding. Oregon does fairly well nationally when it comes to contributing to capital transit costs, but we're in the bottom 10. We're under 3% in terms of our contribution to the statewide transit operations costs. Very, very far behind the national average. That's going to take a lot of collaboration and a lot of riders' voices down in Salem. That's what's going to shift the conversation. And we have an opportunity to start doing that together, and it's really exciting. We've been working with a lot of active transportation, environmental conservation, advocacy organizations to try to shift that conversation here even locally. And for the first time, we've got a prioritization of public transportation funding being the top issue. That's never really happened before, and that's something that we are able to bring to this conversation. And I think this is just the start. So really what we're looking forward to is building on the trust that we establish here together, and hopefully we can go out and do some big things together to make this system better for everybody. So we're really looking forward to the future, and we thank you for just sticking with us through all these years. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that's all I have signed up this morning for testimony. Is there anyone else who did not sign up in advance and who really would like to comment today on Ordinance 332? Because I don't want to shut this off since we have time here. Well, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask General Manager McFarland if you have any comments or thoughts before we consider this ordinance.
I think per the public comment, this has been well researched and well documented and well testified before the board, so I have no additional comments, but I certainly am able to answer any questions or bring staff up if you have questions that you'd like to have responded to.
Any other comments or questions by the board?
We do regular surveys of riders, and I know BRU has also done that, and they mentioned results of their surveys. What are we finding in our surveys regarding ridership concern about transfer times?
So let me ask Bernie Bottomley to come up and respond to that, who captures our consumer data.
Director Prosser, Bernie Bottomley. So we do a series of rider surveys. We do an attitude and awareness survey, and then we've done fare surveys. Transfer time is not a top issue. Generally, the issues are around additional service, additional hours, weekends, and Saturdays and Sundays in particular are issues that we hear a lot about. Cost. Transfers don't rise to a statistically significant level, generally.
Okay. And
specifically the issue of not being able to make a long journey and missing a connection.
okay.
Can I piggyback on that question? So where is the information gathered from? Is it specific areas, all three jurisdictions, or three areas, or how do we get that data?
So both the attitude and awareness survey and the fare survey are statistically valid sampling methods. So they're system-wide, and we reach out and have samples taken during the wee hours of the morning and late at night, on weekends, on low-frequency routes, high-frequency routes. So it's very comprehensive.
Okay. And how often do we do that?
We do the attitude and awareness survey once a year, or we will be, with the recommendation of the Secretary of State's audit. The fare survey, which runs us about $100,000, we do, the last one was in 2012, so we do that less often.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Then maybe, did you have something else, Director Prosser?
Yeah, one other one, because when we've talked about this before, recognizing that with this proposal, there is a revenue impact, and it's not clear, but it's like in the $1 to $2 million range. we talked about how we would cover that, and we talked about unused portion of the fare mitigation set aside. Is that money still available?
Short answer, no. We have been, I think, very successful in growing the fare mitigation program.
That's good.
But the end result is that that is all currently committed. So that's one of the major, if you will, facts that have changed since the first time you considered that, where we still had a pretty good balance in those funds. But over the last year, as I noted, we've partnered with over 50 firms on each of the 2 fare programs and creating, frankly, full commitment of those funds at this point.
Okay, so there's no offset at this, or is there an offset from another source that we?
Obviously, in the budgets moving forward, we would have to find the offset. But what I guess in response to that question, the fare mitigation program would be one of those potential offsets, but it would reduce benefits from what we have right now. But there's 101 other offsets that are possible as well that we would have to investigate during the budget process.
Okay. Any questions?
Well, maybe to get this going, I think what I'd like to suggest is let's get a motion on the table, if there is one, to approve ordinance 332, and then we can have some discussion by the board before we actually do a roll call vote by our general counsel. So I'd like to see if there's someone on the board who'd like to make a motion to. I hear a motion to approve ordinance 332 in a second. All right, so the motion is on the table. I think what I'd like to do, I think this is an issue that all of us have thought about a lot and dealt with this. I think maybe I'd like each of us to talk about their thoughts on this and maybe even where they are before we take the vote. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but is there someone who would like to start this discussion?
I'd be happy to
Okay.
start the discussion.
Dr. Stowell?
So, you know, we've been working on this for quite some time, and we've had numerous discussions, and I know my fellow board members have met with numerous folks, both internally and externally, to come to this decision, and we've actually even had input from the FTA in regards to the proper processes of what we needed to do, and that kind of halted this, or actually suspended it for a while, almost a year, before we were able to address this. And, you know, one of the main reasons or primary reasons that I'm supportive of this is because, you know, I think, and as folks have heard me say before, I really look to be a champion for poverty to prosperity and give folks an opportunity to move forward and access one of the top 2 critical components of moving there, and that's transportation and child care. And last I checked, we don't do child care, but we do transportation. And we don't do child care, right? Okay, next budget. Yeah. Maybe we've got like a daycare on the back of the Max I didn't know about. And so, you know, as we look to empower the folks within our community and within this region to be able to have that opportunity to get up that, you know, that proverbial ladder, I see this as a critical component, meaning transportation. And as we look at the opportunities that we have as an agency to continue to move this direction and to continue to give these enhancements, I see this as a critical component to those enhancements. We've had significant demographic changes over the last decade that we've seen, and folks have moved to the outer edges of our communities that historically had, you know, that had service that was usable to a degree, but you know, as we've increased the populations in those areas and the populations of folks who are low income and medium income, you know, we haven't been able to keep up those services because it's caught some of us by surprise, and not just TriMet. I mean, we're talking about all the different agencies that look to service the population that I'm describing here. And so having an opportunity to be a part of the solution rather than the barrier is something that I think is very, very critical as an agency to continue to move forward. As we look at these changes and changes such as this, they come with risk. And the risk that we, as a board, that we're taking is a financial risk that we don't always know the outcome. And those risks require us to balance many decisions that not everybody is aware of. And so it's a complex matrix that we have to look at as board members and as staff. I mean, we're always weighing these things. And again, as always, I appreciate our partners and folks that work with this. BRU is here and Opal, but also the union, has been very supportive of some of the things that we need to do and being here at the table as we address these things. But as we look at this, the risk that we take are many times, I'm going to use the word subjective, although that may not be the right word, subjective because we don't know the outcome, and we can spend all day doing projections, but we don't essentially know how this is going to play out. And so as we look at that, as we look to balance, as we move forward, someone mentioned service enhancements. I'm also a tremendous supporter of continued service enhancements, and we're not at the service level that we were in 2008, and that concerns me because I think that's a critical component to getting the service hours and revenue hours back up to where they need to be. And I think that's another critical component to ensuring that we're taking care of the population that I've referenced, but also the entire population of our ridership. I mean, we are here for all of our riders. And so as I look at this decision, it does come with a financial impact, a potential financial impact that we've estimated as to where it's going to land. And do I have concerns about that financial impact? I do. But in a sense, there are various things that I think we have to sometimes take the risk on to move forward. Lastly, I will reference the idea that TriMet has been a leader in public transportation, not just here in the region or the state, but across the country. And I think this is a further way that TriMet continues to put its stamp of excellence upon the transit community, looking at ways that we can continue to be a service to our rider population, our stakeholders, and contribute to the vibrancy of this community from an economic development standpoint and all of those things. I think this is a critical decision that moves us closer and closer to our goal of enhancing the service that many more people will begin to adopt and use as we move forward. So I stand in support of the 2.5-hour transfer time change and will vote in favor of it.
Thank you. Please.
Ditto. But what I also would like to say, I'm sitting here thinking of the I don't know how many years now, 3 or 4 years that we've gone through this process together with Opal and with Bro. And some of it was really difficult. And some of them at the time was like, personally, as a board member, how am I going to support this when I have community members from Opal staff and others coming and not being willing to sit there and talk about not just what you needed or what you wanted or what the community needed or wanted, but what we needed to look at as an organization of TriMet. So where I'm very pleased, it's taken a very long time to get here, but also I think to go forward as a community and working with Opal and Bro, we also need to make sure that somehow is not repeated, but that the action is looked at in a different way, because I will sit here and tell you that sometimes I was at a point of frustration of saying absolutely not. I'm not going to support this because of the interactions that I felt were very disrespectful. And this is not to be pointing my finger at you, but this is to be telling you the way of engagement, and I know that's your work, so that's your advocacy organization, so I totally get that. And sometimes the interaction was not where it needed to be to try to get to the other side. So I am in support of this, absolutely. But again, when I hear many of you speaking this morning saying we want to go forward and hopefully that will look different. I know there have been some changes and shifts, but there may be some other really hard work that we need to engage in, and I hope that how we do that will look different and that there will be opportunity to be able to have fair disagreement, but really what is the outcome? What is the outcome that we're trying to get to? So thank you.
Dr. Prosser.
I think it's important to remember that everybody who is here every day, and that's staff, board members, members of the public, BRU, Opal, everybody has the best interests of this organization in mind. Within that, it's possible that we disagree at times. And I think it's important to remember that disagreement is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think through the discussion, it can actually help improve the outcome. In my career in public service, I've seen a lot of really hot issues come forward, and it's become very apparent to me if you will, as a student of public interactions, that boards and commissions see kind of two kinds of responses when we're dealing with an issue. And one is where I categorize these as you see a depth of interest and you see a breadth of interest. And both are equally valid. Depth of interest actually, I think, is well demonstrated on this transfer issue. We have a lot of people who are very deeply invested in this. It's very important to you, and that's a perfectly valid feeling. We also have breadth of interest, and you know, how does the greater ridership, how does the greater community feel about it? And we're not getting as strong a feeling from a breadth of folks, and so we kind of balance those out. As we've gone through these discussions, one of the themes that I've picked up all the way through is it seems like one of the prime motivators for looking at a revised transfer policy is because of concerns about service issues, that we don't have enough frequent service, that we don't have enough reliable service, and that adds to the difficulty of all of our customers moving around. You know, coming from city government in the burbs, I know that, you know, the fringes are very concerned about the lack of service, and so I fully understand that. And one of my priorities in joining this board was to do what I can do to improve that. TriMet, to its credit, has entered into the Service Enhancement Planning Program. I'm a very strong supporter of that. We're getting really good feedback, and I think we're going to see some good results come out of that. But that's going to take money. I think that's going to have more impact and will benefit more people of all income levels, you know, of all interests, than simply focusing on the transfer policy. It's a matter of priorities. And at this point, my priority is more on continuing to work to enhance and improve services. And I'm concerned about the money that it'll take to implement this. And for that reason, I'll vote against this. But again, I do want to thank BRU and Opal for your advocacy. It is important. And I really appreciate the comments we're hearing today and lately about working together, because I agree with you that there are a lot of avenues that we can work together, and I think it would be a blast to be able to do that. So I thank you for those comments.
Anybody
You
done
want to go next, or you want me to go?
Go ahead, Doctor.
Go ahead on. Okay. Thank you.
I only have a backstory.
Well, first of all, I want to echo some of the things that Director Consuelo said about the way the interactions went as we were discussing this. Bullying, intimidating, very disrespectful. It did not endear you as individuals or your group to me as being one who really wanted to sit down and talk about issues, but as one who wanted to try to use force in terms of the tactics that you used to get us to see it your way and vote in your favor. When I hear you speaking now, history is still yet to be written to see if it's really going to be cooperation, or will those same tactics come back again because things don't seem to be going your particular way. And I don't like that. To be very honest, personally, I just don't like those types of things. I don't like just to say something because the moment looks like it's going to go a different way now. Maybe it's better for us to say we're going to work together and do that. I hope we can, as long as I'm on the board. I do have concern for riders and the ability to use transit and move around. However, This is not a long-term situation, nor solution by extending the transfer time. The loss of revenue will have to be recouped in some way, which means if there isn't more money coming, there's going to have to be some reductions and cuts someplace in order to make this work. And those will be tough decisions. Because if service cuts arise, what will be the solution? Taking off more services, cutting particular programs, reducing the transfer time, raising the fares again. And as Director Stovall said, there is a risk being taken because we don't know what's going to happen. And even though we look back and we can see from the paper that was given us how we were at one point, 2008, 2009, and where we are at 2014, a lot of things happened in there. One of those things was known as a Great Recession, a Great Depression. And I don't know what it's going to be like in the future, given the tenor where it seems to be politically in the United States at this point, particularly in dealing with the level of the office of president and what's going to happen around there to move what I'm hearing Congress and Senate saying. I don't think it's going to get better. I think our worst days are yet ahead. And for that reason, I believe that the money that is going to be spent to do this extended, expanded transfer time will be better used to add more frequent service levels, not so much to those frequent service lines, but to also look at the lines that are having the greatest of demand and how we can increase the service for those coming from the outer edges, fringes of our communities, and trying to get in and connect to that. I also believe that we need, and we've taken steps to do that, of having a more reliable fleet, of having new buses and new cars that have come for the light rail is going to be something that I think will add to individuals being able to move around quickly and have more accessibility to the transit system. Therefore, for those reasons and many other reasons that I have not stated, I will be voting as it was from the beginning, no on expanding the transfer times. Thank you, and thank you for your support, your advocacy, and hope that you will continue to do that as you continue to go forward and we continue to meet and discuss.
Director Esmond, do you have some
Yeah,
comments?
I agree with most everything was said here, except for the no. I am voting for the people who have not had the opportunity for 2.5 hours of transfer time for the past year because some people don't understand how things work. We wanted to do the right thing. Some people thought it's not, anyway. I will be voting for the transfer time, period.
Thank you. I think what you heard up here is some honest feedback and observations on this issue. I think the board up here knows that I've struggled with this issue in terms of where I am, and I've talked with some of you out in the audience about this. I struggled because the question for me is increasing the transfer time by 30 minutes the best way to address the transit needs of those folks with low income, or is service enhancements and service increases or other things better? Because I'm looking for something that really targets and benefits the low-income folks directly. I don't have the answers for those. I am really pleased about the low-income mitigation program being fully utilized. I think that's an area where we need to, again, continue to look at. Director Prosser and I had an opportunity to go to Seattle and learn a little bit about what Seattle's doing in terms of their new low-income fare program, which really is, benefit directly those folks with low incomes. They have a 200% level. But I also would point out that it came with a pretty doggone big price tag. I think their price tag is about $11 million. That's right? Yeah. The first year, $11 million to operate this program. And the other thing is we need to have an electronic fare program in place if you ever wanted to have something like that occur. And And I think, again, this transfer ordinance will definitely benefit people of low income, but will also benefit others. And so when I look at the information that's been presented, I think you folks have done a really good job of outlining for the board who's going to benefit and why it's important that you have this. And I'm also continually struck by the comments that Director Stovall makes in terms of one of the keys to prosperity is transportation, and I agree with him, and it seems like it's pretty obvious that's one of the things that you need to have to be able to have a good job. So therefore, based on, I think, what I've heard from Opal and Bus Riders Unite, and while I don't have all of the answers at this time, I am willing to go forward with this small step to really help riders who are struggling. But I want to make it clear to you that I know there's budget issues, and I do believe that increasing service, frequency of service, and service enhancements are the way to best address the needs of all of the income levels and all the people who either must or decide that they want to use our transit system. So I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that, and I'm going to continue to push for that. And I think, Jonathan, you mentioned it. In order to really be successful here, it's clear to me that additional resources need to be brought to bear for public transit in the state of Oregon. I was just blown away when I looked at Seattle's tools. You know, they have sales tax. They're able to use a vehicle registration fee or tab fees, and they're actually using property taxes, I believe, for operational purposes also. And so there's just a lot of limits in Oregon that are going to force us to move think outside of the box and move outside of the box, be able to provide the service that we need to in this region. So I'm counting on partnerships with folks like Opal and Bus Riders Unite. We can't do it alone, and we need to work together. And so I'm going to take you at your word there, but I think there is some residual feelings as a result of some of the things that we were subjected to. But based on what you said today, I'm going to take you at your word, and I'm going to be willing to move forward on this. But it will require partnerships, and I'm looking at you and setting my expectation that we do that as we move forward from today. Okay? All right. Any other comments or questions by the board before we move forward? Okay, we have a motion on the table. The motion is to approve Ordinance 332. I'm going to ask the General Counsel to do a roll call vote on this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. I'll start with Director Esmond.
Aye.
Director Bethel.
Nay.
Director Warner.
Aye.
Director Zaragoza.
Yes.
Director Stovall.
Aye.
Director Prosser.
No.
The motion passes. And the Ordinance 332 is adopted with an operative effective date of March 1st, 2015.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Counsel. All right, with that, we're going to move into the last business item we have today, which is Ordinance 336, which is amending Chapter 14 of the TriMet Code to revise the definition of net earnings from self-employment, which seems to be something we do every year based on new IRS restrictions or requirements, right? So this is the first reading. Would you like to do that?
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Ordinance number 336 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, TriMet amending Chapter 14 of the TriMet Code to revise the definition of net earnings from self-employment. This is the first reading.
Thank you. All right, any comments or thoughts from this one? Okay, we'll look forward to the second reading on this. Thank you.
I look forward to the explanation.
You will get it. You'll get it.
Sure.
Okay, is there any other business that needs to come before the board this morning? If not,
I just want to thank the staff. We had an advertising firm for my union come out from Colorado to shoot the lights, film that for for us, and use that for our website, etc. So, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, John Fall out there. Everybody.
Does everybody know what lights you're talking about?
Yeah. The Christmas lights on the tree. On the Telecom Bridge, which our workers, my members installed. So that's what the
quite dramatic. Is that
the LEDs? So, yep.
It's all in terms of the formal business. We do have 2 briefing items that we'd like to bring to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, I know, but I was asking a question. Are the lights on the bridge now? Or?
No. So the answer is no.
Okay, all right.
I would tell you that at the DB event that I mentioned earlier, they were a bit of a distraction to the event because we had testing going on at the very same time. Some people
interesting.
accused us of actually planning that together. I can't say that we were quite that organized, but it was a nice
I
coincidence.
thought Janelle had such pull. And not only did he get the lights, during that event, we also got to see the first bus cross Silicon Bridge because they were testing clearances for the bus. So, Janelle, you rock.
So I'm going to adjourn the business meeting and then turn back. We still have 2 briefing items on our agenda, which I'm going to turn over to you, Mr. General Manager, unless we need another break. Are we okay?
No.
All right, let's continue on.
Two things so I can get out of here.
So if I can ask Alan and Carrie to come up. What we wanted to do is brief you on where we are with the service plan for the Orange Line. And I think we have some very responsive changes to that plan. As you know, we actually started earlier this year beginning to discuss this plan with the public. And actually, since that time, we've had some major, I think, changes to the plan that have been documented, and Carrie will go through those. The other thing I wanted to note, and this is something we've been wanting to do, and we are now programmed to do it, which is to take all of the corridor bus service, those bus hours that really ran between Milwaukee and downtown Portland, that will be replaced with light rail. We took all of those bus hours and reprogrammed them to be effective bus service feeding the line and providing local connections within North Clackamas County. And being able to do that, I think, allows us to note that there is no reduction in bus service in terms of total hours of bus service when we open the line, but we actually have a much more enhanced service plan overall. And I wanted Carrie and Alan to go through that with you.
I'm actually going to hand it directly over to Carrie, who has been our lead on this.
Good morning. So I just wanted to talk about the bus service changes associated with the Portland-Milwaukee Orange Line opening. It's pretty small. So I've got PowerPoint slides for everybody that's in your packet. I thought I would leave the map up just so I could refer to that if you have any questions. So, and I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to talk about where we were at the beginning of the year and then move into where we are currently. We had 3 starting assumptions for bus service in the Portland-Milwaukee corridor. The first one was that all of the buses that currently use the Ross Island Bridge, which would be the 9 Powell, the 17 Holgate, and the 19 Woodstock that currently cross the Ross Island Bridge, they would instead use the Tillicum Crossing. The next assumption was that all the buses that travel north on McLaughlin from Clackamas County, the line 31, the 31, the 32, the 33, and the 99, all of those buses would end service in Milwaukee. They would not travel any further north than Milwaukee. And the other assumption was that there would be no other bus service changes. We got feedback from many people regarding those assumptions, and there were 4 main themes or issues that came out of that. The first one was, please expand bus service in new areas, Johnson Creek Boulevard, Tacoma Street, the Selwood Bridge. Please continue to have service to the Milwaukee Park and Ride and the Tacoma Park and Ride as well. The second one was transfer concerns. People, particularly south of Milwaukee and in Oregon City, who did not want to transfer. That was a big concern. The next was bus service north of downtown Milwaukee along McLaughlin and in inner southwest Portland as well. And so those were the main themes that we heard. So armed with that feedback, we developed the initial proposal, and that has 3 significant changes from the starting assumptions. And The changes were that the 9 and the 17 would use the new Tillicum, but the 19, the Woodstock, would continue to stay on the Ross Island Bridge. And we felt like that responded to the concern of keep service in inner southwest Portland. Additionally, the line 99, instead of stopping it in Milwaukee, we would continue with the line 99. We'd serve the Milwaukee Park and Ride, the Tacoma Park and Ride, Tacoma Street, Sellwood, and we'd come up into downtown Portland. This offers people a one-seat ride, particularly from Oregon City. They might be giving up some travel time, but they do have the option to stay on the bus if they wanted to. The last change was that we were going to combine the lines 28, this service, with the line 34, both neighborhood service in Milwaukee, Gladstone, and into Oregon City. We're going to combine those and change the routing a bit of the line 28. It would continue up Johnson Creek Boulevard, serve the Tacoma Park and Ride, serve the Milwaukee Park and Ride, and we'd also double the service. So it currently has about every 70-minute frequency, and we go to about every 35-minute frequency on that. And that was also to respond to new areas of service and neighborhood service that we'd heard a lot about. So we also got feedback on that. And we had very many positive comments, particularly for the proposal to increase the frequency on the 28 and the 34. We still had a lot of people who have transfer concerns, travel time concerns, also concerns about the service along McLaughlin, for bus service along McLaughlin. And we also heard, please add frequency, please add span of service, more hours of service. That's something that you've heard already today that we hear all the time. So we also got feedback on that original proposal, and that helped us make changes to our final proposal. And we're going to continue with what we just talked about, the 2834, but we're also going to add to that some weekend service on the line 19 to respond to frequency and hours of service. Currently, the line 19 starts service on Saturdays and Sundays at about 10 a.m. in southeast Portland, and that would move to about 8 a.m. The line 99, our original proposal showed the line 99 coming into Portland on Corbett Avenue, and we got some comments from Southwest Portland and people who live along Corbett who didn't really like that too well, and so we're going to continue that along McAdam and into downtown Portland. Also on the line 99, currently it only travels in the peak direction, so into Portland in the morning and away from Portland in the afternoon. The proposal has it going both directions, both in the morning and in the afternoon. The biggest change, though, for the final proposal is to combine the lines 31, which travels between Clackamas Town Center, along King and Harrison into downtown Milwaukee, with the line 33, McLaughlin, that travels along McLaughlin into Oregon City and then on to Clackamas Community College. And that would literally be just combining those into one line. And the offshoot of that is that the line 31 has significantly increased service. The line 33, as you might know, is frequent service, and the line 31 would be practically frequent service as well. So much more neighborhood service, much more hours of service and frequency on that line. So if I could, I'm going to jump ahead to the page 9, the chart that I have, and just to show you kind of some of the changes that we're talking about. The 28 would go from 70-minute frequency to 30, so that would be doubled. The number of trips would go from about 20 to a little over 40. The 31 would go from about an average frequency of 30 minutes to about 15 minutes. It has 72 trips currently, and that would go to somewhere over 100 trips per day. The line 34, just like the 28, would go from 70-minute frequency to 35-minute frequency, double the number of trips. And the line 99 doesn't get an increase in frequency, but because we're traveling in both directions, it would double the number of trips, and estimated. The feedback that we've heard to date, the comment period is still open until next Monday, but we have heard that many people are very excited about light rail down in Clackamas County and Milwaukee. They wish it would start next week, not next year, so there's a lot of excitement about that. We've also gotten a lot of positive comments about this proposal, the increased frequency on the 28, the 34, and the 31. We still have a lot of people that are concerned about transfers and potential travel time concerns as well. And McLaughlin, north of Milwaukee, in southeast Portland. And frequency and span of service and hours of service, something that we always hear. We do believe, though, that this final proposal is giving new connections and improved reliability with the improved frequency, with new connections, new service on Johnson Creek Boulevard, new service to some of the rail stations, service across the Selwood Bridge into downtown Portland. It provides access to MAX, to the streetcar, to the tram, to the trolley trail, Springwater Corridor, and the Willamette Greenway. We believe it improves the reliability and helps get many passengers out of the traffic congestion. So the next steps would be to analyze all the feedback that we get. We hope to have the plan finalized by the end of this year or early next year. A transit equity analysis is started now, and we should have a draft by February and a final analysis by April. We'll be bringing this back, the bus service changes, back to the board in April and in May of 2015, and to implement the changes in September of 2015. We will continue to talk with Clackamas County and Milwaukee and places along the Portland-Milwaukee corridor with the Southeast Service Enhancement Plan. So we're not done with service just because this is our plan for the opening of the Orange Line. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
I just have a comment. 1001. I'm happy to hear that the residents of Clackamas County are looking forward to light rail. Thank you. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
And the combined, is it 99 and was it 31? The route that connects the college and
Clackamas Town Center?
Clackamas Town.
That would be the 31 and the 33.
31 and 30. So is that connect all of their campuses now? I mean, they have a campus up by Clackamas Town Center, don't they? I was trying to think, does this line give you a connection now between those two campuses that they don't have today? Close,
it's
okay.
Very close. It's not exactly door to door.
Yeah, but it's close.
You can walk it.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it seems like a real benefit. That's why I was thinking that. Good, okay.
I know they came up before.
Yep.
And the 79 will also goes between Oregon City and Clackamas Town Center, and it probably serves a little closer to the campus, close to the CTC.
Okay. Good. I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much. It's exciting, and I'm pleased that people have engaged, and it sounds like they're pleased with the service enhancements is what it sounds like you're going to be getting there in that whole corridor. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board President, the next briefing item, we want to bring you up to date on the Climate Smart Community Study that our partners at Metro are underway with. That effort is coming in for a landing, as Director Prosser noted in his report from the Metro Committee that he serves on. And we have both Alan and Eric here to give you an update on where this process is.
And again, I have a lot of faith in my staff, so I'm going to hand it directly over to Eric.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning. Board President Warner, members of the board. I'm Eric Hesse, Strategic Planning Coordinator at TriMet and our staff lead on the Climate Smart Communities project, which, as Neil noted, has been Metro-led. And I'm here today to provide you a summary of the project, which is coming to fruition this month, and its implications for TriMet in particular. So, as you may recall, I was here with the Metro staff project lead about a year ago, giving you an update on the project, but I thought since it's been a while, it might still be valuable to give you a bit of background as a reminder. So the Climate Smart Communities Scenarios project is the region's response to a state mandate that was included in House Bill 2001, also known as the Jobs and Transportation Act, or JTA. And that bill in 2009 required the Metro region here to develop and adopt a plan, including policies and investments to reduce per capita greenhouse gas emissions from cars and small trucks by 20% from the 2005 level by 2035. And now, after a 4-year collaborative process informed by research, analysis, community engagement, and deliberation by policymakers, the region has identified a strategy that meets the target, and in fact it exceeds it, while also supporting many other state, regional, and local goals, including clean air and water, transportation choices, healthy and equitable communities, and a strong economy. So the 3 phases delineated here on the slide describe the process that we've taken over those last 4 years in terms of assessing a full suite of potential policy and investment approaches and then narrowing those choices down. So in phase 1, back in 2011, actually 144 different scenarios were considered and evaluated to help us understand the impact of various choices that we had before us. And early on in that analysis, increased transit service was identified as an effective tool for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also providing a number of important co-benefits, such as increasing physical activity, reducing household transportation costs, and helping manage congestion. In phase 2, policymakers and the public used the findings from phase 1 to develop 3 alternative scenarios that bundled the most effective strategies, including transit. And these 3 scenarios really varied by the amount of investment and policy action being taken. And I'll give you a little more detail shortly. And now we're in phase 3 here, wrapping up with a single preferred strategy being prepared for adoption later this month by the Metro Council. So these are the 3 scenarios that were most deeply evaluated for their relative costs and benefits, including their greenhouse gas reduction potential. And again, they really ranged from scenario A as a continuation of recent trends and investment levels and immediately available funding through our adopted plans, both local and regional, such as our regional transportation plan, local land use plans, to then scenario C, a more ambitious vision for increased investment and some new policies that support those investments as well. So those 3 were evaluated, particularly, again, to meet the target, to understand how well they did that, but then also to evaluate the costs and benefits. And as you can see here, we did, in fact, exceed the target with the preferred approach that this past spring the regional policymakers basically directed Metro staff to evaluate, something between B and C, with the transit investment particularly being at a higher level than the adopted plans. And so you do see that this comes in at about 29%, so well beyond the target, but the policymakers and the public have felt that the number of co-benefits coming with those additional investments and policies seem worth that additional cost that comes with that. So what is in this preferred scenario as it's now being termed? So it's essentially, this is kind of fundamentally what the package looks like that'll be moving forward, and then I'll get a little bit more into the content as well. But it really is this set of recommended policies and action for how the region moves forward to implement the greenhouse gas emission strategies, but with an eye toward advancing the rest of the goals, the desired outcomes, the future we want in our region. So the legislation itself will contain a specific set of policy changes to the regional framework plan as required by state law. And the framework plan is sort of Metro's guiding principles document and tells them how they do their business. So that's where those changes will be implemented. Further on, that will inform other changes to regional policies as they are updated. There's also then a toolbox of possible actions, and this focuses on different actors from local governments to transit providers such as TriMet to the port and other special districts, focusing on things that they can do that can help to reduce emissions. So for us, a lot of this is increasing transit service, but other elements that can pinpoint benefits, including emissions. And these will be things that get implemented through our individual plans as well as the regional transportation plan moving forward. In addition, there's a short list of actions, including finding the funding to do this, but also then testing out some of these strategies and near-term pilot projects to demonstrate the benefits of synergistically bringing together investments in transit service with, for example, better signal management and operations, more demand management, more information about the service that's there to really bring these together to get the best bang for the buck. In addition, the law also requires, and there is proposed, a performance monitoring approach that very much builds on what Metro is already required to monitor, but also then focusing on these key strategies and their implementation moving forward. So what are these key strategies? Certainly first and foremost for this board's attention, making transit convenient, frequent, accessible, and affordable is front and center, both in the strategy but also for us and our responsibility to develop that. But it's part of a broader multimodal strategy that also leverages technology, information, and policy, such as parking, to make our investments more effective, both in terms of impact and cost effectiveness. And then for each of these areas, there's a suite of policies and investments identified based on adopted plans with heightened investment in some areas, especially transit. So what is in that transit strategy? Again, from the language of the strategy, it translates into these four key areas, we think, and certainly your comments earlier today indicate this focus on frequency and system expansion as the need to really provide additional transit. And so, as you all, I think, recognize, it makes it faster to make your trips if there's more frequency, more convenient, more transfers are possible, and all of that work, while also then growing the system in order to meet the needs from the growing region, the diversification of employment and land uses happening throughout the region, and making sure service is there, but that it's accessible, that we're working with our partners to provide safe and direct access through walking and biking as well as park and ride to our service so that people can use it, and then finally making sure that it's affordable through a focus on fares, which is a policy you have engaged in and will continue to discuss, making sure that the balance is there to make it accessible to those that have challenge affording it while also supporting the ability to provide service moving forward. And it's really key to emphasize that our service enhancement plans are the guiding principle and the guiding vision for how we would implement this more service. We've been very clear with our partners in the public that that's the process by which we're defining this vision for moving forward, and that's what we've been modeling as we evaluate what the scenario would look like for more and better transit. And so this next slide shows some of the modeling that we've done to do that. And as you know, we're not fully complete with those plans yet, but that we've used our early vision to help to define this, and we'll continue to refine those, and as those are developed and adopted, they will be the guiding principle for future investments with your guidance as the board. So this very much does, I think, show us that this investment in more and better transit has a beneficial impact. We were able to see, compared to current plans, certainly a growth and improved access for households and employers, but especially for low-income households, as you can see, that the access improves greater for those households than for the region as a whole. Increased transit service was also found to contribute strongly to a number of co-benefits, again, including public health and economic prosperity, and I'll touch on those in a little more detail. And while the benefits for more and better transit are clear, we also have to be very clear-eyed about what it will take to achieve those benefits. So what will it take? This is based on, again, original estimates, and these are still being refined as we implement the plans moving forward. But at this point, we do see that the preferred scenario calls for investing more in transit capital and operations than in current plans, particularly the regional transportation plan. And you may need to refer to your copy there. I know it's small here as well. But while it is a larger investment than the federal financial constraint within different levels. From currently committed dollars. And the region is very much committed to exploring how to make sure that we can raise the resources to implement that plan, but that'll be an ongoing conversation. We also know that we're not alone in developing this, that as I mentioned, for access in particular, but in our ability to be efficient and safe in our operations, we'll be working with our local partners, with our advocacy organizations, with our state legislatures who can provide resources, and others that will help us implement the land use and transportation strategies that we've defined. So again, what are the benefits? I've made some reference to these, but we really did see that this preferred approach increased across all of these levels the benefits that people were enjoying in terms of reducing air pollution and increasing physical activity, which we did with the Oregon Health Authority, actually one of the most extensive health impact assessments of this plan, and found significant savings in terms of reduced illness and fatalities and costs associated with them, and they were able to monetize them in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so true cost benefits as we think about the investments we're making in the region. Also less air pollution, meaning fewer environmental costs and more opportunity for business expansion in the region. Spending less time in traffic and reduced delay as a result of more transportation choices being created, which also saves businesses money, supports job creations, and promoting the efficient movement of goods. Households themselves are saving more by having these choices. So I think you've heard in the past, a household can save about $10,000 a year by getting rid of one car and switching to TriMet. So those are benefits that are also being accrued by our households and can be reinvested in our community. And again, noting that low-income households in particular, we're seeing to benefit through these increased choices and options. So to wrap up, what are the next steps? In fact, this week, MPAC and JPAC, Metro's policy advisory committees, will be making their final recommendations to the Metro Council, who is scheduled to adopt the preferred strategy at the December 18th meeting. And that will then be submitted, if the council adopts it, to the state Department of Land Conservation and Development and their commission for legal review and acceptance in January. And if the commission then approves it, the strategy will be implemented and monitored beginning in 2015 through a variety of local projects coming up, but all building toward, especially for the transportation-related investments and policies, as part of the next regional transportation plan update, which is scheduled for 2018, though the conversation leading up to that will be over the next 3 to 4 years for sure. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have, and I would also invite the General Manager and Board Member Prosser to share any observations they have from their experience serving on the policymaking boards that's been engaged with this project.
Go ahead. I just have a question. You mentioned that it was the Oregon Health Authority?
Yes.
Did they do the health impact assessment for this project?
That's correct. A couple different versions of it, in fact. Getting into more detail as we had the single preferred alternative. And those documents, the reports are available, and there are good executive summaries we'd be happy to pass along to you so you could see more of the benefits.
The executive summary would be great.
Okay, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
I might add one or two things if I could. One, this was a multi-year process because there are 26 jurisdictions in the region, and getting to yes on anything that is this substantive can take quite a while. And when we began, we were not confident that we could get to 20% or better. And with all of the analysis, we were very pleased to see that especially with investments in transit, that we could in fact exceed it. And so just wanted to reiterate Eric's statement that we've been very clear that our service enhancement plans are the way we're thinking about how we would improve this service, and what they modeled and what they got these positive benefits are consistent with those service enhancement plans. We know we need additional revenues to be able to complete those, but they're all sort of in the same vein of trying to move toward that as a vision for our participation in making this work.
I think another thing to add is it has been a long, kind of drawn-out process, and it's like any long process, attention levels kind of wax and wane as you go through the process, but as you get near the end, you get a little bit stronger interest. The last couple of meetings at MPAC, we have seen more concerns expressed about the price tag, because it is certainly substantial. If I could think of the right word beyond substantial, that would be absolutely correct. But I think it's important to remember that this is a 20-year plan, number one, and so that's the price tag over 20 years. I think there's a little bit of concern has been expressed that some of these strategies that are included in the recommended plan compete for the same dollars, and one of the saving graces is that they do not. Gas tax can only be used for roads and highways. They will not be used for transit. But the other thing is that I think this also emphasizes for TriMet the importance of looking at our financial resources and start having a discussion with our customers, our stakeholders, the business community, our partners, about how we will contribute our portion to this effort. And we are a very key portion of this. And so I know the Futures Committee that the general manager has put together as a first step in that, but we are going to need to engage everybody in the region about, what is the region willing to contribute to this? And because it is a crucial issue that we're facing. So,
if I could follow up on that, maybe you can tell me if I'm reading this proper. What it says is essentially the funding for streets and highways, active transportation, everything else except for transit is really kind of commensurate with the, constrained RTP right now. But we're looking at another $200 million a year in new revenues between capital and operations for transit.
correct.
So just read it, if that's the way I read it, that's a simple way I read that, is that's where they're putting all their eggs in this transit basket to be able to meet these standards and this plan. Am I reading that properly?
I don't know if I would say that they're putting all their eggs in the basket, but they're putting a substantial number of them.
Okay.
I would just note that that's the revenue requirement at the end of the period, not starting next year, for example.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it ramps up.
So again,
Yes,
the
taking the
20-year
full package and then analyzing it.
All right.
Grow into it.
And something you said kind of threw up a red flag. I mean, I think, and maybe you can help me out here, Director Prosser, is that, I hear the discussion of fares. They want to keep fares low, but we want $200 million more a year, And so I think there's a belief, it feels like a simplistic belief, that if you just lowered fares, you're going to get, a commensurate increase in ridership. And I don't know that that's actually true. And I've seen some elasticity studies years ago that said essentially you can only get, even if you offer transit for free, there's a certain penetration that you're going to be able to get, and that's it. And so I appreciate the comments that we need to maintain fares and not have them price out people of low and moderate incomes like we just talked about. But they've got to understand that we've got to get creative in our fares, and somehow using a fare box, we need to keep getting some rate of return and maybe inch that percentage of our operating revenues up if we want to be successful. So have you had that dialogue?
I don't think we've gotten to that level
Okay.
of specificity. I would say, though, that to me, what this clearly points out, that we need all the arrows in the quiver that we can possibly get. Fares will be a portion of it, but again, we can't price our customers out.
I agree with that.
Of our buses. So, looking at the payroll tax, looking at other possible revenue sources, looking at partnerships. Certainly, I think also within this transit thing, improving access to bus stops and safety of bus stops. How many bus stops do we have in this region where people are standing in a ditch alongside a road with no curbs? That is a local responsibility, and we need to work with our local partners. Okay, if we can improve service, improve frequency, what can you do to make the rider experience better before they step on the bus? So,
Are those dollars included in this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's good to know.
well, and I'm looking at it, I said yes, but
Certainly some of that access improvement and these facility and other improvements, so this is not all sort of dollars for service. And on that point, especially for the capital side, it's the full price tag, but as we well know, our federal partners are there for, often at least half of those dollars. So this is not necessarily everything we would have to find here, but what does it cost?
Director Prosser, Stovall?
So just so that I understand kind of this price tag and the way this is presented, as we look at this, what will it take? Draft approach, $24 billion, full RTP, $29 billion. constrained RTP, 19 billion. That would be the cost of implementation over the 20-year period.
Correct.
Now, the annual cost of implementation is broken down, I'm assuming, based on those aggregate numbers and then from an annual basis. Now, I understand that, we don't have to come up with, 240 million or 320 million as of 2015. But for every year we're not closing the gap, it actually puts more stress on the end of the time period. Is that how I can read this?
Certainly, you could see that as that sort of curve that would move upward if you'd want to get to that total. Yes, I think.
So yeah, if you didn't, if we're starting off lower than projected, then we've got to make it up some way if we want to achieve what we're talking about here, based on the projections that we have.
Right. Again, some of this will be quite large lumps. So, for example, Southwest
Correct.
Corridor is in here, Columbia River Crossing is in here. Those are big chunks that will come together in financing packages and move us. So. I think that's true. I think the operations is, as we implement the service enhancement plans, we'll need to be finding the resources to grow into them to get them out there, such that, again, when they're fully implemented, that's the cost that it would take to sustain moving forward. So I think you're right, while it also doesn't require us to all increment each year at this level.
Well, and one of the points of clarification, I could even help me with, one of the points of discussion Neil and I know both have brought up in Impact and in JPAC, is the transit numbers include capital and operations.
And maintenance. Yes.
And maintenance. And I'm not clear on the highway, because this is, initially, they were only showing capital. They weren't showing operations and maintenance, and there is a substantial operations and maintenance cost to our highway system.
It's true, that is still excluded, and it's currently estimated about another $12 billion. That's primarily in locals, and a lot of that's budgeted not fully at the level that they would want, but that's also in their plans. But in terms of the balance of investments.
With a B.
That was with a B.
Yeah, that's minor.
Merry Christmas, we get all that.
Right. Now, again, these are the plans that they have for maintaining their system. So, it's not to say that's a totally new increment, but it's not reflected here in terms of how much is invested, say, in our roads versus our transit system.
I feel like I should add just one other point, which is transit is heavily relied on here, not because they couldn't figure out or nobody else wanted to take it on, but because it's the most effective tool.
Very good point.
Right. And it makes the rest of those plans work as well. They don't have to increase the capacity as much on their roadway systems if we can move people and goods more efficiently.
I just asked the question just so you know, because I wanted to highlight that exact point, is that, they are relying on transit and increasing transit service in a big way to meet greenhouse gas requirements. One other question, I think I've asked this before, and I can't remember the answer. Is there a parallel effort going on to deal with the stationary sources of greenhouse gases? To me, the whole issue of buildings and retrofitting buildings, making more efficient use of buildings, it seems like is there a comparable plan out there looking at that? And I haven't heard of that, and that's why I'm asking.
There's a statewide plan, aspirational, to do all statewide buildings to be upgraded to energy efficiency.
The state-owned buildings.
State-owned buildings.
Yeah, I'm talking about private,
The price of power here is so cheap compared to other parts of the country. It's hard to get that going.
I don't know of a specific target with these legal mandates that's required. There is an adopted target for emissions reductions, but this is one that's moved forward further to actually have plans and investments identified to address it.
But I would just note, Mr. Board President, I think that is an area of increasing focus.
I hope so.
And certainly there's tools available. The Energy Trust of Oregon, for example, is working with a lot of building owners to retrofit, become more efficient and more effective. I think what we probably need to see parallel to these efforts is those efforts need to also be encouraged and grow. I might also note that all of these projections were done based on an assumption about fleet change over time and the component of electric vehicles increasing, hybrid vehicles increasing, fuel economy increasing. So that's given to us as an input from more global sources that come from the state DEQ and EPA, actually. So there is still already a lot of work going on in that regard, making our current transportation fleet more carbon responsible, I guess I would put it.
Okay, thank you.
So that concludes our briefing items.
Great. I appreciate the briefing, and that was very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, are we excused?
Last message, once
Thank you.
again, happy holidays.
Yes, same to you. Same to you. Thank you.
Oh, just by way of note, I'll also mention this to Board Member Esmond. We do a series of holiday dinners at all of our garages. Next Wednesday, I'll pass around the schedule that I'm going to be passing around the garage to all of you. If you can make any of that, be more than welcome.
Always up for food. Always.
Thought you were the
Ruby
cook.
Junction isn't very far.